Thanks everybody for joining us today. You're here with Sales Intel and Sendoso. We're going to be talking about thinking outside of the inbox, how to increase audience engagement. Obviously, big topic for what's going on right now and how we've all had to adapt to the current state of affairs. My name is Jason Hubbard. I'm Vice President of Partnerships and Alliances at Sales Intel, and excited to have Braden Young here with us, Chief Alliance Officer out of Sendoso. Welcome, Braden.
Good to be here. Yeah, Chief Alliance Officer is a new title for me. This went by growth for a while as like the most Silicon Valley title ever. I'm like, yeah, growth. So like growth and co-founder was like the two titles that made zero sense. So it's nice to have an official title now. I was like Alliance Officer. Figured that sounded pretty fancy.
That's funny. I just moved from growth myself, so I think we both probably did that about the same
You
time.
know that Silicon Valley, like, what do you do? Growth, just growth.
Yeah, my agency I had before joining Sales Intel was your growth expert, and people always joked that it was an ED firm. Um, but anyway, uh, so today's agenda, we'll brief introductions. We've already done that. Talk briefly about evolution of Sendoso, how did you guys get to be what you are today. And then the primary topic, of course, thinking outside of the inbox. How do you extend reach and drive engagement outside of emails, which we all rely on so heavily. And then how Sendoso pairs perfectly with Sales Intel and our B2B buyer data. So Brandon, I'll hand most of this over to you. We'll keep it conversational and go back and forth. But yeah, tell us how did Sendoso get your start?
What a picture, right? Like pre-pandemic, like when you could actually like hug your coworkers. So that picture is Chris and I were both the co-founders of Sendoso. Before Sendoso, we were both sales guys. I mean, still in sales basically. But like the story of Sendoso, where it came from, about 5 years ago, we started sending people e-gifts to Starbucks. We called it Coffee Sender. So the idea was like, hey, like you want to take my demo? Here's $5 to Starbucks. And you could throw it in emails, you could throw it in LinkedIn. And we found somebody on Upwork to essentially build out this super horrible site called Coffee Sender. But it's kind of cool. We built it for beer money. And the goal was like, let's just see how much it can do and we'll become rich on a 1% margin. We quickly learned that 1% margin was not something you could build a company on. But the company was doing like $40,000 in e-gifts every month, which was amazing. And we're like, this might actually be something. So I jumped from my job and worked. I mean, by jumped, I mean jumped like, hey, like company went like the other startup went under. So I was like, let's go work on something new. So started working on Coffee Sender. We quickly saw that, hey, like people wanted to send more than just a digital e-gift. How could they send other things from lunch? So we looked at Uber Eats. How could they send things like physical gifts? So we looked at doing warehousing, which has many stories over it. Like warehousing is really hard and Amazon does a really, really good job with it. And I think we took that for granted. So we opened our first warehouse in Vegas. Then all of a sudden we had 5 warehouses around the world. And so it was a pretty wild experience of learning how to do physical things and learning what a WMS was and trying to figure out how that side worked. Then we added direct gifts like cupcakes and sheet cakes and flowers and wine, et cetera, which is the next edition. And then we plugged into Amazon too. So all that happened very quickly. We switched the name from Coffee Sender to Sendoso. People always ask, like, why Sendoso? The story I tell VCs is, because, like we wanted to be able to send, so much more than just coffee. But the real story is like we wanted sender.com. That was 10 grand. We didn't have it. Sendoso.com was like a GoDaddy recommendation. Like you could go with Sendoso. We're like, sweet. So went with that to basically be the start of it. So that was about 4 years ago. So over the 4 years, we've been scaling pretty quickly. It's the nice part was we had product market fit really soon. It was like, hey, like people wanted to be able to send things to customers. They wanted to build a relationship. They were looking for personalization, which really helped in the early days of to gain our first customers. Eventually, we shut down Coffee Sender, rolled that all into Sendoso, which is where we are today. It's like a quick backstory. It's very easy to kind of give like a 10,000 foot overview. There were a lot of like long nights, early mornings, lots of beers with Chris being like, hey, I don't think this is going to work, like early days. And so that was those are always fun stories to tell. But it's been a very fast 4.5, 5 years for sure.
That's great. That's great. And of course, we use you guys internally and love using you, and excited having you guys on with us. Um, so yeah, let's talk a little bit about what does sending look like now for most people, and what's it look like for you guys?
I saw this slide earlier, and like it's amazing how having like a true marketing team now building these amazing looking slides is so nice. We used to use like the slide that made no sense that showed the same story, but like to have like actual pictures and just like cool integration slides was awesome. So basically, what we found was a lot of marketing teams and sales teams were sending things out, whether it be digital gifts or physical gifts. Problem was there was really no way to do it easily, and there was really no way to track success. So like one of the questions we still ask on demos today is, it's the holidays, and most likely you're going to send something out to your customers or to your prospects or to your employees, which is amazing. You should, even if you don't use Sendoso or a platform like ours. But the question we always ask is, if you sent a bunch of stuff to your customers, what was the ROI on that? Like if you sent everybody a sweet Yeti mug, which don't send Yeti mugs, everyone does that. Like if you send everybody like great Yeti mugs, great, but like what did that produce for you? And so like that was what we saw in the world of sending. And what we wanted to do was essentially take that method and like that idea of sending gifts out and put it into people's platforms where they live and start to track ROI. So like, hey, I'm sending from Salesforce. I sent them this cool box with a mug and a handwritten note. Did this help move the deal? Or hey, I sent them a handwritten note because like I lost the deal, or they said, hey, let's wait until the end of December. So I wanted to stay in front of them. Great. Like let's track all of that. Not only track, but let's also build triggers around like if a deal hits a certain stage or if it hits a certain score, then you can send certain items, as it kind of goes along the actual sales process. So that was kind of what we saw and where we moved to as we started to build out Sendoso.
Nice.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Nice slide, right? No, go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I was going to say, I think one of the things that you guys do really well is help. I mean, that's certainly how we leverage it. Is use these campaigns in conjunction with our content strategy to try and advance people through the funnel. And I think that's a great thing that you guys covered here in the slide.
Yeah, I think that like when I was asked like, what's that picture in the middle? No joke, we found this guy in Santa Cruz who will, you send him any photo and he paints on a canvas for you for $50. I mean, like we met him at a conference. He was like, hey, this is what I do. We're like, that's awesome. So yes, we plugged it. We plugged him into the platform, and like that guy was like one of the first ones we did. So anyways, fun side note. But like what we see is like there are multiple times you might talk to a customer. And those times become few and far less between also with COVID, right? Because you can't go in person there. You can't drop something off. So every time you interact with that customer, we think there should be something that you could send there would be a gift. A good example is like, let's work backwards. If you have a customer who has announced an IPO, like a lot of tech companies are right now, or maybe they acquired somebody, like it's a really good excuse to send champagne and be like, hey, congrats, I'm pumped for you guys. If you have, a new launch with a customer, like maybe it's in a launch kit. If you are trying to motivate prospects, like maybe there's that photo example, or maybe you can send coffee before a demo or lunch before a demo. One of my favorite campaigns of all time is they called it demo and burritos. So they'd be like, hey, like let's do a demo and we'll send you like an Uber gift card before to get Chipotle. And they would literally title the calendar invites like demo and burritos. And I was like, that's awesome. Like just a unique way to stand out amongst all the millions of emails we get, especially today with COVID. Like this is one of the most important things to essentially stand out from all the other demos people might get. Staying top of mind, I think we'll talk more about this as like virtual experiences. So we've seen work really, really well is not just the gift, but some sort of experience that you might send somebody, like a wine tasting event where sommelier hops on with you, working internally and externally with customers, cocktail carrier kits where you bring like a bartender on and maybe you have a conversation about what's the future of B2B, insert something here, like let's have cocktails and talk about it. Like that's kind of the idea. There's these different experiences. And then first is to the very first thing here, working backwards, is like how to drive interest. So how to get somebody to download a white paper. Maybe you attach an e-gift to it. Maybe you have certain survey where people are giving information and you're sending lunch after to thank them if someone downloads something, et cetera. So we think that the power of reciprocity with gifting is kind of the goal here, and to be very personal to all of these things you might send. I get asked a lot here is like, as you're sending these, like, can you do it at mass? Yes, but I'd recommend to not do 10,000 at one time, but to maybe do like, hey, like, let's get personal as like what you might want to send to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I like the way that you brought up reciprocity. I mean, obviously it's good to show that you support your customers and do things to entice your prospects. But a lot of people don't understand the underlying psychology to it. That when you receive something, even if it's something nominal, that we're programmed to want to do something in return. I mean, I used to be a waiter in my early days, and it's shocking. Like leaving a mint with their check will significantly increase your average tips. And you're doing nothing more than playing into that reciprocity.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm a horrible grandson. I never call my grandma enough, but like when I get that birthday card, like I call her and I have that conversation, which is, even though the check's like for $20, but still it's that conversation that I'm like, man, I got to call her more. And so it's like that give and take sort of thing, which is granted horrible. I should call her more. Anyways.
So yeah, 2020, obviously everything changed. I've seen a lot on my end, but interested to hear kind of what did you guys see, both internally as well as with your customers, and how are they having to adapt?
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing that's been said many times is that people, I don't know about you, but I'm on Zoom calls all day. I imagine you are too. And then you have the million emails that stack up. And so like the digital fatigue and the Zoom fatigue is crazy. So like the playbooks have changed from like, hey, I'm going to send this many emails. I might call them and like I might schedule a demo, or I'm going to do a QBR. Like people are looking for meetings to cancel because they're like, where can I find a half an hour for lunch here? Or it's like if you send me a meeting invite, it doesn't have an agenda in it. I'm like, I don't have time for this sort of thing. So a lot of playbooks have changed as to where you get in front of folks. So with COVID, if you're using email and if you're using calls, that's great. But one of the nicest and most exciting parts of my day is like when I get to walk outside and walk to my mailbox. I don't bring my phone with me. And I walk to the mailbox and I look what's in there and I'm like, hey, like who sent me something? And I'll look at even the junk mail. I wrote a blog post on this, like just to be like, cool, junk mail. Or like I'll see like what's on like my doorstep from Amazon that I forgot that I ordered like a week ago. And like that is a great place for your brand to live, because that's like one of the few moments of the day is like, hey, like where you might want to hit me again. Like, did you look at this case study? Like maybe you send me a book and you're like, hey, Braden, I thought this book was, really relevant to the space that we're in. Maybe you should take a look and read a certain section of it that I thought was relevant. I mean, like if that's how you're selling, is you're using not only email and calls and direct mail, like being outside of the inbox and like in my mailbox, like that's going to be a huge step above the competition. And it's also going to appeal to me of, not just like when I leave work, but work and home are the same place, but you're kind of surrounding me as to like, hey, take a look at this. This is the problem we're trying to solve. I think that makes sense, right?
No, it makes sense
Yeah.
to me, but
Yeah.
I may have been in it too long. Cool. So, yeah, I mean, what are some of the things that you guys have seen that are working or effective?
Yeah, so like the idea at the very top right with those glasses, this was actually something we did. It's funny you asked about like the founding of Sendoso. One of the very first events that we did, and this is a Dreamforce story, was we sponsored an event at the MoMA with like these big companies. We thought they were big at the time. Like it was us and Engageo, and I think it was like Ring Central and a couple others. And like we spent like a ton of money to also be a sponsor there. And we're way out of, I think it was just Chris and I and maybe two other people at the time, but we did these invites to people we wanted to sell where it would the game Password, like you put those glasses on and like that invite turns into something like inviting you to the event at the MoMA. So it was actually one of my wife's ideas, funny enough, that we used for that event. And now we've used it a bunch of times since then. So basically it's these glasses that you can put on. Maybe it's an invite to a webinar. Maybe it's an invite to a demo. It's a very unique way to stand out from what someone else might get. The middle example here is a wine event. We've done a ton of wine events for internal HR use cases and for customers. Basically what happens are you get sent like these mini wine bottles, like 8 of them. You hop on a call. It's you, whoever you invited and like a sommelier who walks you through the wine. Very unique experience. You can do the same thing with cocktails. We've seen this work really well because you're basically walking away from like the, hey, this is just a professional thing, to like, let's have some wine, and like you can actually get to the real core of like what you want to talk about. Those events have been massive for us lately. Depending on like what you want to do, if it's wine, if it's hard alcohol, we've seen both work well there. Something I don't have on the page is we're also testing like, hey, like what things can you bring or try to send to somebody that they might use on a Zoom call. So it used to be that we would send cupcakes out to an office, and like on those cupcakes, half the logos would be like yours and the other half of the logos would be theirs, be like, hey, better together sort of idea. But what we've seen work well is trying to send somebody like maybe a hat they might wear on a call that's just like a funny hat. So like you're looking for like that viral moment where like the rest of the coworkers are like, hey, what is that? Like, what are you wearing? So we've seen that work well with, maybe you might send something to them that's replacing that cupcake send. All the way over to the left is really important stuff, guys, is since everybody's at home, it's important to appeal to to people's families as well. We do 2 sends that are really important. One's like a donut kit. You can make donuts with your kids. It's kind of awesome. Put your brand on it. Other thing is everyone loves their dogs. If they don't have a dog, they're probably getting a dog, because like COVID has been like a huge time for that. So why not also like be at that moment? Then lastly, this down here is we just plugged in a Cameo. Cameo, if you don't know what it is like a cool way to have celebrities read whatever you want them to read. It's like mostly like celebrities, like it's not like the Brad Pitts or Leonardo DiCaprio's of the world, but maybe they'll be on there someday. It's everybody else, which is awesome, and it's been really cool to use this on the sales side. This is another unique way to get in front of somebody, very personalized, which is really important. So these are just a couple things we send out. Like we always say on calls that the biggest question is your imagination. Like how wild can you get? I remember like when we first launched, we used to send like bottles of wine that we would lock and be like, take my demo, I'll send you the key. And like thinking about that now, like I wouldn't want to recommend it now, but 5 years ago it was awesome. So like unique and being personalized is the goal.
Yeah, I absolutely loved whenever you guys told me about Cameo. I mean, that was a use case I had never even thought of. But yeah, when you guys told me about that one, I was like, oh damn, that is smart. And yeah, I definitely shared that with my sales team. Cool. So yeah, tell us about some of these that have worked really well.
Yeah, this is the wine use case that we were chatting about. I mean, like this was those are a couple pictures of the wine. Like this is a great idea. Like to send these out, people get like a note inviting them to an event. You hop on, sommelier's there. Actually, I don't know if you should call them sommeliers. Someone who's walking through the wine. Someone who's like essentially like sommelier is maybe the wrong word, but it's cool to do a unique event with folks. So I would definitely recommend this.
Nice.
Gong is insanely talented with the impressive stuff they come up with. This was an early campaign they did where as you got to a certain stage within like the sales funnel, like you've been accepted by the AE, they're trying to close you, they send a gong out to all those prospects with a note saying, hey, like, looking forward to ringing the gong together. Killer, right? I think that like that's their idea here. This really stands out from anybody else who's essentially in the deal because you're getting something sent to your house. Typically, my biggest point when you're sending and using direct mail with like items like this is you have 2 subsets, right? You have your champion, which I recommend you send this to, and then you have your signer, which is another person you might send this to, but don't send something to your signer and not your champion. Like that's I've seen that happen a lot where someone's like, hey, like the signer got something. The signer's like, who is Gong? Like, why are they sending me something? And like the champion's like, why didn't you send that to me? So like, I recommend maybe doing both or doing your champion over your signer.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. All right. So yeah, yeah, we talked a lot about how you use Sendoso and campaigns to the south side of the inbox. So why are we on here together? And so yeah, a good opportunity to plug Sales Intel a little bit, but obviously, in order to have these types of effective campaigns that you're talking about, it's important to have the data that you need both to fill and drive your campaign so that you got your pipeline full, you've got qualified people to send stuff out to. And then of course you also need the information on like, where is this person actually at? One of the things we rolled out earlier this year that was a big benefit, at least when people were in the office, was the exact location where that person works. So instead of having address being the headquarters for everybody, we actually knew where they were. That's of course gotten a little bit more complicated, and I would love to hear how you guys tackle that problem of what do you do when people aren't coming into the office, Braden?
Yeah, so I mean, like to your point, I think that we use sales intel as well. And like our biggest goal is like when you're using emails to get in front of somebody, like you want to make sure that email is correct if you're attaching an e-gift to it. So it's been huge for us. When it comes to sending things, we have a work from home feature, or that's what we call it internally. And the goal behind it is like when you send the gift out, there's a little check marks or check box that you check, and like you get an email saying, "Hey, Braden from Sendoso is trying to send you something. Can you confirm this is your address?" And so usually that address is like whatever you have on file. Typically, it's like the HQ address, and like they can be like, "No, I'm in Tahoe or I'm in wherever." Utah, and like we'll route the package to there rather than send it to the HQ, which we've seen work really well. That information that we get, like, hey, this is where I am, it's my home address, we don't share with the customer. Gotta love GDPR and CCPA. And so like the goal there is to make it where like it's like, hey, we're routing the package to that location. This info doesn't go in Salesforce, but what's nice about it is we can make sure it gets to its right location. But the important thing there is you need the correct email in order to do this at all, which is one of the major reasons why we're on this call together.
Yeah. I know for us, where the data is particularly important is trying to target those people further up the funnel. So trying to get people to engage initially or come into an early stage event or a demo or something like that, versus kind of later stage stuff. You hope at least you've got a little bit more intelligence and know a little bit more detail about that person. What about for you guys? Where do you see that data being particularly effective?
I would agree. Yeah, I think that like it's typically like as it kind of goes along the sales process, like it works the best because they kind of know who you are. We've seen some great use cases where if someone's lost a deal, like kind of re-engaging, like I think that's worked out really well. Or if someone starts a new job too, is a
Yeah.
good use case.
Yeah, I mean, those are both huge strategies on our part, because if we typically we lose a deal, it's to another data vendor, and we get a good idea when their renewal's coming up. So
Yep.
that's actually future pipeline for us, and that's also a huge prospecting technique for us. Is if somebody leaves a company who's a customer, go call on them at the new company and use it as a foot in the door approach. So both of those are strategies we employ very strongly over here.
Yeah, or maybe you have like maybe you mail out a case study, like rather than email it, but like you actually physically print and mail a case study, and like maybe you highlight a certain section in there and you put a post note in the front of it. I mean, like that sort of thing is different than most folks that know your competition is mailing a case study to somebody, and like I guarantee you, it'll be looked at more sometimes than some of that you might send via email.
Cool. So let's wrap up with just a few takeaways. So yeah, I mean, of course, especially with what's going on right now, figure out ways to engage your customers throughout the journey, and find a way to break through that noise. Because I mean, it's always been noisy, but it's gotten a lot noisier. Expect the unexpected, get creative, and you showed a lot of really good creative examples there that have been effective. And then of course, like we just discussed, you need the data, you need the tech to be able to leverage and do this effectively. Any other takeaways on your end, Braden?
I think if you are looking at direct mail or thinking about giving it a shot or a try, like I recommend just trying out Amazon and sending something. Like try just sending a book yourself to a prospect or to a customer and like kind of see what the reaction is. I don't think you need to buy a full platform sometimes to see like how powerful reciprocity is.
Mm-hmm.
So give that a shot. I mean, like try it with a customer as you approach the renewal and see kind of what happens.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I mean, that's certainly how we have first began doing it. Probably 8-9 years ago when we first started playing around with this stuff. All right, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Give you guys opportunity if you have any questions for myself and Braden, go ahead and drop those in the side panel. while we wait for that, Brandon, I've got to ask. I'm sure you've seen plenty of them. What's one of the best fails that you guys have encountered?
The best fails we've encountered. So sometimes like I think you fall into a category of having too much data on somebody. And so like, or like somebody might do like too much research on somebody and send something that's like uber personalized, like way too much. So like I think that's something that you definitely need to watch out for sometimes. Like if you're digging through somebody's Facebook and Twitter and they're like, hey, I sent something because 3 years ago you said that you really like the Dallas Cowboys. And so I sent you this Dallas Cowboys jersey. I'd be like, you really dug through the Instagram to find like that. So like I would like those ones typically don't work. They're just a little bit too much. So that's a pretty good fail. Another one is maybe you send like the wrong type of e-gift to somebody, like you use the wrong denomination, like you're sending pounds to somebody who's in the US, like that typically sometimes happens too. We try to catch that, but those are ones that we try to stay away from. Is like maybe don't go crazy digging through somebody's social to find something you might want to send to somebody. Like
My favorite that we did, one year we sent out. So I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and right next door to us is where Benton's Bacon comes from. And anybody that's not familiar, Benton's like world-renowned bacon. That's what Michelin star restaurants use and stuff like that. So we decided we were going to do something for Christmas and send out Benton's bacon to all of our partners, and with a campaign of bringing home the bacon and whatever the next year was. I don't remember when it was. And so, highlights, one, make sure you know what the hell you're doing. Two, also make sure you know where your people are. So we sent out to all of the employees at one of the partners, sent it to their home office. Come to find out, the company was 100% remote. The home office was the CEO's home. And so the CEO got like 8 packages of bacon and was also Jewish. It was like, oh, so it's like real glad this guy had a sense of humor about it. Every time we bump into him, he'd laugh about it. But it's like, oh,
yeah. I didn't want that. I think another thing to keep in mind there is like people forget like how hot it is in some parts of the country. Speaking of locations, so like you might send somebody like cupcakes or a candle and it might melt, and like mail like in the UPS truck, like there's not AC, so it sometimes things melt. They open it, they're like, what is this?
Or it lands someplace that's not manned, or people don't check in on it often, and it sits on a table for months.
Yeah,
it can get interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. I don't see any questions on here, so I'll go ahead and wrap this up and let everybody go. But Braden, thanks so much for joining us. It's been fun. Like I said, we will send out a email tomorrow with a link to the recap. You can reply to that if you've got anything for myself or Braden.
Perfect.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
All right. Thanks, everyone.